Moran here and with Senior Housing Forum, and we're doing kind of a weird thing today on this little interview. Normally what happens is I do interviews of all sorts of really interesting people, which means I get to ask them a bunch of questions. But I've got with me on the split screen here my friend Darren Mathis, who is the CEO and founder of Admit Plus. And we have been talking a little bit about my experiences as a consumer of senior living and how unpleasant that process was. And so he had this great idea that he'd actually interview me about that as a way to talk a little bit about their product. And so with that, I'm going to sort of leave all that other stuff hanging, Darren, and I'm going to turn it over to you to ask me some questions.
All right, great. Thanks, Steve. Appreciate it. Again, this is Darren Mathis. We have a product, Admit Plus, and Admit Plus is a digital admission solution that takes all of the move-in paperwork and brings it into an electronic system to version control and digitize all of those documents. So we help guide the residents and family members through a process of completing the documents and then electronically sign those documents and then store them. So we eliminate a lot of the headaches associated with a paper-based move-in process. So with that, Steve, I'd love you to start off by telling the story that and the experience that you had moving your mom into an assisted living organization.
You bet. So it's kind of a long process, and I'm not going to bore you with it, but Mom had a stroke, ended up in the hospital. After 12 days in the hospital, she spent 4 horrible days in a skilled nursing community. And no, I'm going to say it was a skilled nursing facility because it doesn't deserve to be called a community. We ultimately ended up finding a lovely small 6-bed assisted living community that we moved her into. And so we made arrangements to get her moved, loaded her in the car, took her over, got there. And of course, the first thing that happened was, we'll try to get your mom settled as best you can. But, oh, by the way, we've got some paperwork to do. And I knew that of course, that would be the case. But when I sat down at the dining room table there and I looked at the stack, I was shocked. Probably 2-3 inches. You look at this book here, right? It was probably twice or 3 times as big as that. And we spent, it was just, okay, sign this. You got to check this box. Okay, sign this. And it was a very, very horrible, frustrating experience. I mean, one of the things that just drove me crazy about it was I must have had to put my name and my mom's name on, I don't know, 20, 30 forms or something like that over and over again, and it seemed ridiculous. So it was just, it took this already sort of a high tension. New mom was on this last downhill slide, didn't know how long she was going to last, and as she's moved into this community, what am I doing? I'm signing papers instead of getting in to settle mom down. So it was not fun.
Yeah. So where did you guys complete all the paperwork? Did you do it right at the community, or did they come out to you, or how did that process work?
So, there really was only one. I mean, they could have come out to me, but Mom was there and we had to be there. And they had me sit down at it's a big house, right? So we sat at the dining room table, and unlike where the skilled nursing, where it felt more like being signing loan papers for a used car, they tried to make it as pleasant possible. So I had a nice coffee cup with ceramic cup and the things I liked, but it was it's still sort of out in this place. It was just ugh.
Yeah, were you able to get all that done in one sitting, or did you have to do it in multiple visits, or how did that process work?
As I recall, we mostly got it done in one sitting. I think there were a couple of documents that we had to bring back, and usually, of course, as I recall, what that meant is having to dig through her stuff to find it and get it back. So most of it was in a single setting.
Yeah. And you said the stack was about 3 inches high. How many documents do you think you had to complete there? I think you touched
10,000?
30, 40.
10,000? No, yeah, I think it was probably 30 or 40.
Didn't
it just felt like 10,000.
Yeah. And then I'm sure 100,000 signatures too, because there's lots of signatures that go on those documents. So I'm sure that felt like a lot as well.
Yeah, I think I needed ice for my wrist after signing. I mean, a lot of the documents required multiple signatures. Many of them had all these little initial boxes. So you might have a document that only required one or two signatures, and then a dozen initials of individual paragraphs to indicate that you read it, which of course you haven't read.
Right. And what about the back and forth process? Was that the owner, the person working with you, were they reviewing the documents as you were completing them, or was it just kind of turn the page, sign here, turn the page, sign here, fill this out, check this? How did that process work?
Well, I think what happened was it was pretty clear that they've done this before, and so they have sort of this document package they bring and sit down with people on. And there was always some pause, particularly when we got to the dollar part, because for each person it's a little different, and there were some questions about that. I mean, we obviously kind of knew what it was going into it. And then, as best he could, he sort of had the little yellow highlighters for the things that he needed to do. But honestly, and he kind of watched as I was doing it, and so maybe I signed everything and checked everything, but I don't know that there's any really way to know. And
right.
If you told me that I'll bet if you went back and looked at those documents, you'd find something that didn't get signed or checked or initialed.
Right. And maybe the auditor found that instead.
Yep.
So yeah.
Or heaven forbid, if there's a lawsuit, then it gets found, and that's bad. Probably worse for him than it is for me.
So was there a lot of corrections that need to be made? I mean, like if you missed something, did he catch it and say, hey, you missed this? Or was it just you were filling it out and signing and?
No, there were several times where he came back and said, nah, you got to get, there's another box here you got to get, or, okay. Oh, you got to turn that one over and do the back side of it. And, and the other part of it that, I hadn't really thought about until we're talking about it here, but the other part of it is that when you get into that situation and you miss stuff, you feel kind of stupid.
Yeah.
And so what they end up doing is this stuff it makes you feel burdened, and it makes you feel stupid.
Yeah. So. Yep. Been there, done that in the doctor's office where you fill out with the clipboard. So the number one feeling you took away from this, would it be frustration, something else?
Yeah, I would say frustration. And I think it's an area where I'm probably not a typical consumer because this is my business. I could see how if I were a family and I'd never done this before, I would feel a lot of anger about it as well. That, and while intellectually I might know that it's not the fault of the senior living community, the emotion of being angry when I'm just trying to worry about mom, I think would well up really strong. So I think probably my experience in some sense is a little bit different because I had a better handle on what to expect. Although even saying that, I was surprised at the number of documents.
Yeah. And, would you say in the moment, did you feel more positive or less positive about the organization that you were moving?
Oh, in the moment, less positive for sure. Less positive. And it was an emotion, right? I mean, it wasn't intellectual, but it was an emotion.
Yeah. And along with that, did you ever question your decision to move her there?
No, in my case, the answer is really no, because we had no choice. I would say that I have a friend who lives in a CCRC, and I remember talking to him about the admission experience, and of course they were writing checks for multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars for this, and that going through that paperwork process. I remember him describing how as they were doing that, he found himself wondering if that was really the right thing to do. So I think my experience is not necessarily typical in that area.
Yeah, and I think too, when you're in a little bit different scenario like that, where you've got this high of making this decision and you're glad you're making the decision, and then all of a sudden, the rug gets pulled out from under you, and now you've got a feeling of frustration. So you go from here of feeling great about the decision you've made to here with frustration. It can hurt the brand of the organization for sure.
That's absolutely true.
So, do you think the owner was tuned into this frustration? I know you said he was a bit apologetic in the beginning, but do you think he was tuned into your level of frustration?
Yeah, I think he was, and I think that he was really aware that it was a pain, and he was really very apologetic about it. But again, I mean, it's a hard problem, right? Is that if you own or operate a community, this is stuff you have to do, and mostly it's stuff for the state or federal government. Some of it may be to legal requirements from your legal team that you need to do, and so it's important stuff to do. But and I was fortunate because I was working with the owner, and I'm not sure if I'd been working with a staff member or I'd been in a bigger community where it wouldn't have for sure been the staff member. It probably would have been even worse.
Yeah. All right, final question. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate the overall process?
Is there a suck scale? So it sucked.
Yeah, from sucks to great.
From sucks to great. It was on. So I would say on a 1 to 10, it was probably they did the best they could. So I would say for the assisted living, it was probably a 4, and at the nursing home, it was probably a 1.5.
Yeah. Yeah, and oftentimes, the customers that we talk to, the executive team doesn't realize the experience that the residents are having, because they're the ones, they're not, out there doing this process. And I think oftentimes they don't realize the brand damage that happens when you've got super frustrated residents. And, if you look at when we as consumers, when we talk most about a company is in that first 30 days of becoming a customer. So do you want your first real business transaction to be one of frustration? And, do you want those brand new customers talking to their friends and family about what a frustrating process they had with the move-in paperwork? So, that's just kind of, one area that I think oftentimes senior executives at these organizations miss. Just a little bit more about Admit Plus. We work with all size organizations, helping them solve all of these challenges with the paperwork. Companies like Sunrise Senior Living, we work with them to solve all of these problems and then some. So being able to take all of their move-in paperwork across all states and bring them into a system, and then we let the system drive the process. When we have humans driving the process, anytime you introduce a cumbersome, frustrating process, corners get cut, things get missed. Everybody has good intentions of, I'm going to go back through that packet and make sure everything's filled out correctly, but oftentimes that doesn't happen. So when you introduce technology in a system that guides this process, we're able to put in input constraints and required fields in decisioning that selects the right documents at the right time. So you're never in a case where you miss a document or you have a resident complete a document that they shouldn't need to complete. So with these systems, you're able to guide this process. It's structured. It produces the correct output every single time. There's no variability in what happens. So every time when that resident comes in or that family member comes in, whether they're sitting face-to-face with the owner or they're in their home, they're invited to a family portal, they're guided through, and then the documents get generated. We collect the information one time, so that issue you had of filling out your name and your mom's name over and over and over again, that goes away because we collect it one time and we push that data to all of those documents. And then on the flip side for the organization, they have peace of mind that they didn't miss anything. So they don't have to go through a quality control process to make sure that all the right documents are there. Because we're using technology to decide, we're using an algorithm to decide what documents are required, gone are the days of things being missed. So with those documents, though, we're never going to change the regulation. So we're not here to tell anybody that we're able to eliminate documents or anything like that. You're still going to have the volume of documents, but we're going to provide a process that's infinitely easier to do. So taking a process that between the resident and the staff at the organization can take 5 hours, we're able to reduce that down to minutes, not hours, and provide a system and a process that's bulletproof. So when an auditor walks in and they want to see, give me Jane Doe's documents, you know for certain that you're not going to get a deficiency because everything is going to be there. Or if you have a resident that says, hey, I'm moving out early, and you know you have a early termination fee associated with that, gone are the days of that being missed. We have clients that have, before using Admit Plus, expressed concern about that, losing tens of thousands of dollars in early move-out fees because they accidentally forgot to get that document signed. And the resident just says, hey, I'm moving out early, and the community doesn't have a leg to stand on. So with all of these systems and processes that we can put into place with Admit Plus, we completely streamline the whole process and make it compliant. And that's really kind of the whole key here is making it efficient and frictionless for the resident and making it compliant on the back end.
It's been great to talk to you. I just love what you guys are doing. It is, what you've really done is to improve the resident experience at the very front of their resident journey as they move into a community. And you've added with the added benefit of really protecting the senior living community to make sure they've got all the I's dotted and the T's crossed and the forms done they need to do. So I love working with you guys. I love what you're doing to make the industry better for owners and operators. And it's just really cool stuff.
Yeah, well, we love working in this industry. We're not caregivers, but we can do our part to try to help make their jobs easier.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Steve. All right. Talk to you soon.